The morning mist rises from the Wei River as servants hurry through the corridors of the imperial palace in Chang'an, their silk slippers whispering against polished marble floors. It's the 7th month of the year, 752, during the reign of Emperor Zhuanzong, and the capital of the Tang Dynasty shimmers under the oppressive heat of midsummer. But in the depths of the palace's underground chambers, something miraculous awaits. Tons of winter ice preserved in sawdust and straw, ready to transform the sweltering afternoon into an oasis of cool delight. Today, the greatest poets of the Empire will gather not just to compose verses about the moon and mountains, but to compete in something entirely unprecedented: the creation of frozen delicacies that must be as beautiful to the tongue as their accompanying poems are to the ear. This is the story of how literary genius and culinary innovation combined in the most sophisticated civilization of the medieval world to create what we might recognize today as the first ice cream competitions. Welcome to the Tang Dynasty, where poetry was the highest art, where ice was more precious than gold in summer, and where the pursuit of refined pleasure reached heights that wouldn't be matched for centuries to come. Chapter 1. The Palace of Perpetual Summer and the Chambers of Eternal Winter. Li Bai adjusts his silk robes as he descends the stone steps leading to the imperial ice chambers, his wine-flushed cheeks grateful for the cool air that rises from the depths below. The greatest poet of his generation has been summoned to participate in Emperor Zhuanzong's latest innovation, a competition that will challenge the empire's most celebrated literary figures to demonstrate their creativity not just with brush and ink, but with milk, honey, precious mountain ice. The ice chambers beneath the damming palace represent one of the engineering marvels of the Tang Dynasty, though few beyond the imperial household know of their existence. Carved deep into the bedrock beneath Chang'an, these subterranean vaults maintain temperatures that seem to defy the laws of nature. Even when the summer sun turns the capital's streets into furnaces, these chambers remain as cold as a mountain. Winter. The construction of these ice storage facilities began during the reign of Emperor Taizong, when Tang military expeditions to the western regions brought back knowledge of Persian and Central Asian ice preservation techniques. But Chinese engineers, with their characteristic genius for improvement, transformed these foreign methods into something far more sophisticated. The chambers are marvels of thermal engineering. Thick stone walls, insulated with layers of charcoal and sawdust, create barriers against heat penetration. A system of underground channels allows cold air to circulate while preventing warm air from entering. Most ingeniously, the chambers are positioned to take advantage of natural underground springs that maintain consistently cool temperatures throughout the year. But the true marvel lies in the ice itself. Each winter, teams of imperial workers harvest ice from the frozen lakes and rivers around Chang'an. This isn't random cutting of whatever ice is available. It's a carefully orchestrated operation that selects only the clearest, purest ice. The harvesting teams know exactly which sections of which lakes produce ice of the finest quality. Ice so clear it seems like crystallized air. The transportation of this ice to the palace requires logistical coordination that rivals military campaigns. Specially designed carts with thick insulation carry the precious cargo along routes planned to minimize exposure to sunlight. The ice is cut into standardized blocks that fit perfectly into the storage chambers, maximizing preservation efficiency while ensuring easy access when needed. Li Bai pauses at the entrance to the main storage chamber, marveling as he always does at the sight that greets him. Walls of ice blocks stretch into the darkness, each piece fitting perfectly against its neighbors like a crystalline puzzle. The air shimmers with cold, and his breath creates small clouds that drift upward like incense smoke. But today, Li Bai isn't here simply to admire the engineering achievement. He's here because Emperor Xuanzong has decreed that the empire's greatest poets will demonstrate their mastery not just of language, but of the culinary arts that transform simple ingredients into transcendent experiences. The emperor, in his wisdom, has recognized that true artistry transcends any single medium. The servants who tend the ice chambers move with practiced efficiency, selecting blocks of varying sizes for the day's competition. Some pieces are clear, as window glass, perfect for creating transparent effects in the frozen delicacies. Others contain trapped air bubbles that create interesting textures and visual effects. Each type of ice will serve different purposes in the culinary compositions the poets will create. Master Shets Wang approaches Li Bai with the reverence due to the empire's most celebrated poet, but also with the confidence of someone who has spent decades mastering the transformation of simple ingredients into extraordinary experiences. Today, he will serve as technical advisor to poets who know everything about meter and metaphor, but perhaps less about the mysteries of milk proteins and crystallization temperatures. Honored poet Chef Wang says with a deep bow, "The ingredients await your inspiration. We have fresh milk from the imperial dairy, cream so rich it coats silver spoons like liquid silk, honey from the mountain villages, each variety offering different floral notes, fruits from the imperial orchards, peaches so perfectly ripe they seem to glow with their own inner light, plums that balance sweet and tart-like perfectly composed couplets." Li Bai nods thoughtfully, his poet's mind already racing with possibilities. But this isn't just about creating something delicious. It's about creating something that embodies the aesthetic principles that govern all Tang Dynasty arts. The frozen delicacy he creates must demonstrate balance, harmony, seasonal appropriateness, and that ineffable quality the Chinese call Shen Yun, spiritual resonance. The preparation area adjacent to the ice chambers resembles a combination of kitchen and artist's studio. Low tables provide workspace for grinding and mixing ingredients. Specialized tools for shaping and forming are arrayed like instruments in a scholar's study. Most importantly, vessels of various sizes and shapes wait to receive the creative expressions of poets turned temporary confectioners. But the real innovation lies in the technique that Master Chef Wang has developed for creating what the palace calls frozen harmony, mixtures of cream, fruit, and flavorings that are transformed by ice and salt into textures that dance between liquid and solid. This isn't the crude mixing of ingredients with snow that passes for frozen desserts in less sophisticated courts. This is precision technique that controls temperature, texture, and flavor with scientific accuracy. The salt used in this process comes from the imperial monopoly mines in Sichuan, where rock salt of extraordinary purity is extracted from deep underground deposits. When mixed with ice in precise proportions, this salt creates temperatures cold enough to freeze cream mixtures, while allowing for controlled stirring that prevents the formation of large ice crystals. Li Bai watches as servants demonstrate that technique, their movements as choreographed as court dancers. Ice and salt are layered in large bronze vessels, creating beds of controlled cold. Smaller vessels containing the cream mixtures are nestled into this frozen environment, then stirred with wooden paddles in rhythmic motions that ensures smooth, consistent texture. The timing required for this process demands attention that rivals the composition of regulated verse. Too much stirring, and the mixture becomes grainy. Too little, and it freezes into an inedible block. The perfect balance creates textures that melt on the tongue while releasing flavors in carefully orchestrated sequences. Li Bai selects his ingredients and begins planning his creation. He understands that this competition represents something unprecedented in the history of Chinese culture. For the first time, the empire's greatest literary artists are being challenged to express their creativity through an entirely different medium. The skills that make them masters of poetry, attention to balance, appreciation of subtle harmony, Understanding of seasonal appropriateness must now be applied to the creation of ephemeral culinary art. The other poets begin arriving as the morning progresses, each reacting with characteristic style to the unusual challenge they face. Du Fu, Li Bai's great contemporary and rival, approaches the ingredients with the same methodical attention he brings to his verse composition. Wang Wei, master of landscape poetry, seems particularly drawn to the visual possibilities of creating frozen compositions that mirror natural beauty. The younger poets display the nervous energy of students facing their first major examination. This competition will test not just their creativity, but their ability to adapt their artistic vision to unfamiliar constraints. Success will bring imperial favor and lasting reputation. Failure risks becoming a source of amusement for rivals and critics. "My honored poets," the emperor announces, his voice carrying the authority that rules an empire stretching from Korea to Central Asia. Today, you will demonstrate that the Chinese genius for refinement extends beyond the written word. You will create frozen delicacies that embody the same principles of balance and harmony that govern your verses. Each creation must be accompanied by a poem that captures its essence, creating a unified work of art that speaks to multiple senses simultaneously. The challenge is now clear. The poets must create both culinary and literary masterpieces that complement and enhance each other. The frozen delicacy must be worthy of imperial taste, while the accompanying poem must capture the essence of the culinary creation in language that will outlast the melting of ice. As the competition begins in earnest, the ice chambers fill with an energy that combines scholarly concentration with artistic excitement. The greatest poets of the Tang Dynasty are about to attempt something that has never been tried before: the creation of edible poetry that will transform the simple pleasure of eating into an aesthetic experience worthy of the most sophisticated. Civilization on Earth. Chapter 2. The Alchemy of Milk and Moon-Touched. Ice Wang Wei contemplates the bowl of fresh cream before him as if it were a blank scroll awaiting his brush. His weathered hands steady despite the 70 years that have taught him patience in all artistic endeavors. The cream, delivered this morning from the imperial dairy's finest buffalo, gleams with the subtle luster of pearls. But Wang Wei sees something more. He sees the potential for creating edible landscapes that mirror the mountain scenes he has spent a lifetime capturing in ink and verse. The technique of transforming liquid cream into frozen artistry requires understanding that goes far beyond simple cooking. Master Chef Wang has spent the morning explaining the principles that govern this culinary alchemy. Principles that would fascinate the Taoist alchemists who seek to transform base metals into gold. Here, the transformation is from liquid to solid, from simple ingredients to transcendent experience. The key lies in understanding the behavior of cream when subjected to controlled cold. Unlike water, which freezes into rigid crystal structures, cream contains fats and proteins that create complex textures when frozen slowly and stirred continuously. The art lies in manipulating these natural properties to create textures that range from silky smoothness to delicate crystalline structures. Wang Wei begins by infusing his cream with flavors that evoke the mountain wilderness he loves. Dried osmanthus flowers, their fragrance like distilled moonlight, steep gently in the warming cream. Pine nuts from the western mountains, ground to release their resinous sweetness. Wild honey from bees that feed on mountain flowers, each variety offering subtle differences in color and taste. The infusion process requires the same patience that Wang Wei brings to meditation. The cream must be warmed just enough to awaken the flavors without scalding the delicate proteins that will create the final texture. He stirs slowly, counterclockwise, following the natural pattern of water flowing around mountain stones. Li Bai, working at the adjacent table, takes a characteristically bold approach. Where Wang Wei seeks subtle harmony, Li Bai pursues dramatic contrast. His base cream receives additions that would make cautious cooks blanch, fermented mare's milk obtained from Mongol traders. Its sharp tang balanced by dates stuffed with crushed pistachios, rose water from Persia. Its floral intensity moderated by the cooling effect of crushed mint leaves. Brother Wang Li Bai calls out with the casual familiarity that only great artists can share. Your creation promises the serenity of mountain mornings. Mine shall capture the wild joy of caravan nights under desert stars. The mixing of such disparate flavors requires intuition that comes only from years of understanding how different tastes interact on the palate. Li Bai tastes constantly as he works, adjusting proportions with the same instinct that guides his poetic improvisations. Too much rose water and the delicacy becomes perfumed soap. Too little and the exotic character that defines his aesthetic disappears. Du Fu approaches the challenge with characteristic, methodical precision. His notebook, normally filled with carefully crafted verses, now contains detailed observations about ingredient proportions and freezing times. Where his contemporaries work from intuition, Du Fu seeks to understand the underlying principles that govern successful frozen dessert creation. His chosen flavors reflect his poetic preoccupations with social commentary and historical resonance. Black sesame seeds ground to release their nutty intensity represent the common people whose labor sustains the empire. Dried persimmons from his home province provide sweetness tempered with the complexity that comes from long preservation. Gold leaf, provided by imperial largesse, will crown his creation as a reminder that even the finest arts depend on material prosperity. The younger poets struggle more obviously with the unfamiliar medium. Poet Meng, whose verses about spring flowers have earned court recognition, finds himself paralyzed by the temporary nature of frozen deserts. His poetry seeks to capture permanent beauty in lasting language. How can he express artistic vision through something that melts away even as it's consumed? Master Chef Wang observes these struggles with the patience of an experienced teacher. He moves from table to table, offering technical guidance while respecting the artistic vision each poet brings to the challenge. His role is not to dictate creative choices, but to ensure that ambitious artistic concepts can be successfully realized in edible form. Honored Meng, he suggests gently, perhaps the temporary nature of your creation enhances rather than diminishes its beauty. The cherry blossoms you celebrate in verse are treasured precisely because they bloom so briefly. Your frozen delicacy can embody the same principle, perfect beauty that must be savored in the moment of its existence. The bronze vessels used for freezing represent another marvel of Tang Dynasty craftsmanship. Cast in workshops that supply the imperial court, these vessels combine functional excellence with aesthetic beauty. Their thick walls provide thermal mass that maintains steady temperatures. Their polish, the preparation of the ice and salt mixtures, requires timing that would challenge experienced generals coordinating military campaigns. Each poet's creation demands specific freezing conditions. Wang Wei's delicate mountain flavors need gentle, gradual cooling that preserves subtle aromatics. Li Bai's bold mixture requires more aggressive freezing to balance its intense flavors. The servant's responsible for ice preparation work with practiced efficiency, adjusting salt ratios and stirring speeds according to Master Chef Wang's precise instructions. They understand that their technical expertise enables the poet's artistic expression. Too much salt and the mixture freezes too quickly, creating grainy textures. Too little, and the freezing process takes so long that flavors become muddled. Surfaces allow for easy monitoring of the freezing process. As the morning progresses, the ice chambers fill with the sounds of artistic creation. The rhythmic scraping of paddles against bronze, the gentle splashing of cream mixtures being stirred, the occasional exclamation of delight or frustration as poets discover unexpected results from their experimental combinations. Wang Wei's mixture begins showing the first signs of successful transformation. The cream infused with osmanthus and pine nut thickens gradually as ice crystals form and break apart under constant stirring. The texture develops a silky consistency that coats the wooden paddle like liquid satin. The pale yellow color, tinted by the honey and osmanthus, resembles moonlight reflected on mountain snow. Li Bai's more aggressive mixture requires different handling. The fermented mare's milk creates protein structures that demand vigorous stirring to prevent curdling. The rosewater tends to separate unless incorporated at exactly the right temperature. But as the mixture begins to freeze, it develops a complex texture that mirrors the poet's complicated flavor profile. Smooth and rich with unexpected crystalline bursts that release intense flavor. Du Fu documents each stage of his process with scholarly precision. His mixture, darkened by black sesame and persimmon, develops the deep brown color of rich earth. The texture remains smooth despite the ground sesame, testament to his careful attention to grinding techniques and mixing ratios. Gold leaf waits to crown the finished creation, its metallic gleam providing visual contrast to the earthen base. The challenge of timing becomes apparent as the competition progresses. Each mixture reaches optimal consistency at a different rate, requiring poets to monitor their creations with attention usually reserved for calligraphy practice. Miss the perfect moment and the texture suffers irreparably. Emperor Xuanzang circulates among the working poets, his presence adding formality to the proceedings while his genuine curiosity about the creative process keeps the atmosphere from becoming oppressively ceremonial. His questions reveal sophisticated understanding of both culinary technique and poetic principle. Master Wang Wei, the emperor, inquires, observing the subtle transformation occurring in the poet's mixture, how do you maintain the delicate balance between your mountain flavors as the freezing process intensifies some tastes while muting others? Wang Wei pauses his stirring to consider the question with the same care he would give to explaining a difficult verse. Your Majesty, the freezing process resembles the aging of wine or the seasoning of inkstones. Time and cold reveal hidden harmonies while subduing harsh notes. The art lies in understanding how each ingredient will respond to transformation. The emperor nods approvingly, recognizing the deeper principle that underlies Wang Wei's response. The greatest artists understand their materials so thoroughly that they can predict how external forces will affect their creations. This understanding, whether applied to poetry or frozen desserts, separates mastery from mere competence. As the first frozen delicacies near completion, anticipation builds among the assembled poets and court officials. This experiment in cross-disciplinary artistry will either demonstrate the unlimited scope of Chinese creative genius or provide cautionary lessons about the dangers of venturing beyond established artistic boundaries. The serving vessels prepared for the finished creations reflect the ceremony's importance. Porcelain bowls from the imperial kilns, their surfaces decorated with seasonal motifs that complement the summer setting. Silver spoons crafted by master metalworkers, their handles engraved with poetic quotations that celebrate the pleasures of refined taste. Master, Chef Wang, makes final adjustments to the serving preparation, ensuring that each poet's creation will be presented under optimal conditions. Timing becomes crucial. Frozen desserts must be served at the precise moment when texture and temperature combine to create maximum sensory impact. The transformation of simple ingredients into sophisticated culinary art nears completion as the morning advances toward the midday heat. In the cool depths of the imperial ice chambers, poetry and gastronomy prepare to merge in ways that will influence Chinese culture for centuries to come. The greatest poets of the Tang Dynasty have discovered that artistic excellence recognizes no boundaries between different forms of creative expression. Their frozen creations, temporary as cherry blossoms but perfect in their moment of existence, will prove that true artistry can transform any medium into vehicles for transcendent beauty. Chapter 3. The 5 Flavors of Literary Perfection. The moment of presentation arrives as servants arrange the completed frozen delicacies on a lacquered table that gleams like black mirror in the candlelight. Each creation sits in its porcelain bowl like a poem made edible, the product of morning-long labor that has transformed the empire's greatest literary minds into experimental confectioners. Emperor Xuanzong takes his place at the head of the table, his eyes bright with anticipation for this unprecedented fusion of culinary and literary arts. Wang Wei presents his creation first, as befits his senior status among the assembled poets. His frozen delicacy resembles a miniature mountain landscape rendered in pale golden cream. Osmanthus flowers, their delicate petals preserved whole in the frozen mixture, create the impression of snow scattered across distant peaks. Pine nuts nestled throughout add textural contrast that suggests rocky outcroppings on mountain slopes. Your Majesty, Wang Wei begins, his voice carrying the measured cadence that makes his poetry so memorable. I present Mountain Morning After. Fresh snow, both in frozen form and verse. He unfolds a silk scroll and reads in the classical style that has made him the master of landscape poetry. Morning light touches peaks where osmanthus blooms. Pine shadows dance in valleys, deep with cream. What mountain hermit, tasting winter's gift, would not prefer this palace to his cave? The emperor tastes Wang Wei's creation with the deliberate attention he brings to important state documents. The initial flavor is subtle sweetness, balanced by floral notes that seem to bloom on the tongue. The pine nuts provide textural punctuation that keeps the experience from becoming monotonous. Most remarkably, the frozen temperature enhances rather than diminishes the delicate aromatics. Master Wang, the emperor pronounces, you have achieved harmony between form and content that honors both your poetic reputation and our imperial kitchen. The flavors unfold like a scroll painting, revealing new details with each moment of attention. Li Bai's turn comes next, and his creation immediately announces its bold ambitions. The base color shifts from pale cream to deep rose, with crystalline fragments that catch the light like scattered jewels. The fermented mare's milk has created a complex foundation that supports the Persian rosewater and crushed mint, while dates and pistachios provide sweet and savory counterpoints. Behold Desert Caravan at the Oasis of Dreams, Li Bai declares. With characteristic theatrical flair, his poem emerges in the irregular rhythms that define his most adventurous work. Mare's milk and roses meet where east greets west. Merchants' dreams frozen in palace bowls. Sweet dates remember Persian garden walls, while mint recalls the cooling desert wells. What emperor has tasted nomad joy transformed to fit imperial pleasure halls? The emperor's reaction to Li Bai's creation is immediately visible. His eyebrows rise in surprise at the initial intensity. Then his expression settles into thoughtful appreciation as the complex flavors reveal their relationships. The fermented mare's milk provides a tangy foundation that makes the rosewater seem exotic, rather than overwhelming. The mint offers cooling relief that prepares the palate for the sweet richness of dates and pistachios. Master Li, the emperor observes, your creation challenges the palate as your poetry challenges conventional thinking. Both demand attention and reward those brave enough to embrace unfamiliar territories. Du Fu approaches his presentation with the systematic precision that characterizes all his work. His frozen delicacy appears deliberately modest, dark brown from black sesame and persimmon, crowned with a single sheet of gold leaf that transforms humble ingredients into imperial luxury. I offer the common earth that sustains golden dynasties, Du Fu announces. then reads his accompanying verse with the moral gravity that distinguishes his poetry from his more flamboyant contemporaries. Black sesame remembers farmers' hands. Persimmon knows the labor of harvest time. Yet gold adorns what common fields provide, as palace luxury rests on people's work. Let emperors taste the earth that bears their thrones, and sweeten justice with remembered toil. The emperor's reaction to Du Fu's creation reveals his appreciation for its conceptual sophistication. The black sesame provides earthy richness that grounds the sweetness of persimmon in something more substantial than mere pleasure. The gold leaf, initially seeming like pure decoration, creates a visual reminder of the economic relationships that Du Fu's poetry consistently explores. Master Du, the emperor acknowledges, you have created food for thought as well as sustenance for the body. Your frozen delicacy teaches while it pleases, embodying the Confucian ideal that art should improve as well as entertain. The younger poets present their creations with the nervous energy of students before examining magistrates. Meng has overcome his initial paralysis to create something that captures the ephemeral beauty he celebrates in his flower poetry. His mixture combines white peach and jasmine tea, the pale color enhanced by crystallized ginger that provides both visual interest and palate-cleansing sharpness. His poem embraces the temporary nature of frozen desserts that had initially seemed so problematic. Spring peaches bloom just once before they fall. Jasmine perfumes one perfect summer night. This frozen beauty melts like cherry snow, teaching hearts to treasure what won't last. Imperial taste preserves the moment's gift, making memory of pleasure's briefest joy. Poet Bai, known for his technical mastery of regulated verse, has created a frozen delicacy that demonstrates similar precision. His mixture layers different flavors in precise proportions. Chrysanthemum tea forms the base, while honey and dried lychee provide sweetness moderated by ginger and white pepper. The result is complex without being chaotic, each flavor occupying its proper place in a harmonious composition. The emperor tastes each creation with growing appreciation for the unexpected artistic possibilities revealed by this unusual competition. Each poet has found ways to express their characteristic aesthetic vision through the unfamiliar medium of frozen desserts. More remarkably, the constraint of working with ice and cream has pushed each artist to discover new aspects of their creative capabilities. Master Chef Wang observes the proceedings with professional satisfaction. His role as technical advisor has enabled artistic achievements that wouldn't have been possible without his expertise in ingredient behavior and freezing techniques. The successful marriage of culinary craft and poetic vision validates his belief that the highest arts share common principles regardless of their specific media. The formal tasting is followed by informal discussion as poets and court officials share their impressions of the various creations. The conversation reveals sophisticated understanding of how different flavors interact on the palate, and how textural contrasts enhance or detract from overall aesthetic effects. Wang Wei's mountain landscape in frozen form generates particular admiration for its subtlety. Several tasters comment on how the osmanthus flowers release their fragrance gradually as the mixture melts, creating an evolving sensory experience that mirrors the way his landscape poems reveal new details with repeated reading. Li Bai's bold fusion of Eastern and Western flavors provokes more divided reactions. Some praise its adventurous spirit and successful integration of seemingly incompatible ingredients. Others find it too challenging for comfortable enjoyment. The debate mirrors critical responses to Li Bai's poetry, which similarly divides audiences between those who appreciate innovation and those who prefer traditional approaches. Du Fu's creation earns respect for its intellectual sophistication, though some question whether frozen desserts are appropriate vehicles for social commentary. The gold leaf proves particularly controversial. Some see it as a brilliant visual metaphor for economic inequality, while others consider it excessive decoration that distracts from the essential flavors. The younger poet's creations receive encouraging response with particular praise for their successful adaptation of seasonal flower imagery to the constraints of frozen dessert composition. Their work demonstrates that artistic principles learned in one medium can be successfully transferred to others when guided by understanding of the new medium's specific requirements. As the formal competition concludes, Emperor Xuanzang announces his judgment with the diplomatic skill that has maintained peace across the empire's vast territories. Rather than declaring a single winner, he praises each poet for demonstrating different aspects of artistic excellence. Wang Wei receives recognition for harmony and subtlety, Li Bai for innovation and boldness, Du Fu for intellectual depth and social consciousness. The younger poets earn encouragement for their successful adaptation to unfamiliar challenges and their demonstration that traditional poetic themes can find expression through new artistic media. The emperor's inclusive approach ensures that no artist loses face while establishing the competition as a celebration of diverse approaches to creative excellence, but the true significance of the competition extends beyond individual recognition. The successful fusion of poetry and culinary arts establishes a precedent for cross-disciplinary artistic exploration that will influence Chinese culture for centuries. The demonstration that literary skills can enhance other forms of creative expression validates the Confucian belief in the interconnectedness of all learning. The preservation of the winning recipes and accompanying poems ensures that this experimental moment will have lasting impact. Future generations of Chinese artists will look back on this day as the moment when the boundaries between different art forms were shown to be permeable rather than absolute. As the ice chambers gradually return to their normal quiet, the lingering effects of the competition continue to resonate. The greatest poets of the Tang Dynasty have proven that artistic excellence transcends any single medium. That creativity, guided by understanding, can transform even the most unlikely materials into vehicles for transcendent beauty. The 5 flavors of literary perfection, harmony, innovation, wisdom, tradition, and adaptation have found expression, not just in verse, but in frozen delicacies that melt on the tongue while leaving permanent impressions on memory and imagination. Chapter 4. The Science of Sweet Serenity. Master Physician Zhang Zhongjing makes his way through the palace corridors in the pre-dawn darkness, his medical kit clinking softly with glass vials and bronze implements. Word has reached him that yesterday's unprecedented poetry competition has produced more than artistic triumph. Several participants are suffering from what servants whisper about as ice stomach and frozen key disruption. The empire's most celebrated poets, it seems, have discovered that creating and consuming frozen delicacies requires understanding principles that bridge medicine, philosophy, and culinary science. In his private study, illuminated by steady oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on medical texts imported from India and Persia, Zhang Zhongjing spreads out his observations about the physiological effects of consuming rapidly frozen mixtures. His training in traditional Chinese medicine has taught him to view the human body as a system of energetic balances that can be disrupted by extreme temperatures or unusual food combinations. Yesterday's competition has provided him with unique opportunities to observe how the introduction of frozen foods affects these delicate equilibriums. Li Bai's condition proves most instructive. The great poet, never one to practice moderation in any aspect of life, consumed not only his own exotic creation, but sampled every other entry with characteristic enthusiasm. The result is a fascinating case study in how different flavor combinations and freezing temperatures interact with individual constitution and temperament. Honored poet Zhang Zhongjing says as he examines Li Bai's pulse with the practiced touch that can detect subtle variations in energy flow, "Your adventurous palate has provided valuable lessons about the intersection of culinary innovation and bodily harmony. The fermented mare's milk in your creation, combined with the cooling properties of mint and the heating effects of rosewater, has created what we might call competing temperature influences within your digestive system. Li Bai, despite his discomfort, maintains the intellectual curiosity that drives his poetic innovations. Master Zhang, does this mean that the art of frozen dessert creation requires medical knowledge as well as aesthetic sensibility? Must poets become physicians to perfect their culinary experiments? The question reveals the deeper implications of the previous day's competition. The successful creation of frozen delicacies that enhance rather than disrupt bodily harmony requires understanding principles that traditional Chinese medicine has developed over centuries. Temperature, flavor combinations, individual constitution, seasonal appropriateness, and proper proportions all influence how frozen foods affect those who consume them. Zhang Hijing's examination reveals that Wang Wei's more conservative creation produced the least digestive disruption among the competitors. The gentle flavors and moderate freezing temperature created what medical theory describes as harmonious cooling, a reduction in body heat that complements rather than conflicts with natural energy patterns. Master Wang's osmanthus and pine nut mixture. Zhang Zhongjing explains to his assistant while preparing herbal remedies for the affected poets, demonstrates intuitive understanding of medical principles. Osmanthus flowers possess warming qualities that balance the cooling effects of ice. Pine nuts provide substantial nutrition that supports digestive function even under the stress of processing frozen foods. The result is pleasure without physiological disruption. Du Fu's creation presents more complex analysis. The black sesame provides what Chinese medicine calls kidney strengthening, properties that support the body's ability to process unusual foods. However, the persimmon's cooling nature, intensified by freezing, creates challenges for individuals whose constitution tends toward cold dampness. The gold leaf, while visually striking, provides no nutritional benefit and may actually interfere with the body's processing of other nutrients. The younger poet's conditions reveal how individual constitution influences response to frozen desserts. Poet Meng's delicate flower-based creation, while aesthetically successful, proved too cooling for his naturally cold constitution. The jasmine tea and white peach, both cooling in traditional medical classification, combined with ice to create what Zhang Zhongjing diagnoses as internal cold accumulation, the art of frozen desert creation. Zhang Zhongjing concludes while preparing warming herbs to counteract the poet's symptoms, requires understanding that flavors and temperatures affect different individuals in different ways. What provides refreshing pleasure for one person may create discomfort for another. The truly skilled practitioner must consider not only aesthetic goals, but physiological appropriateness. This medical insight leads to the development of what will become known as constitutional frozen dessert theory, a systematic approach to creating frozen delicacies that complement rather than challenge individual physical characteristics. Zhang Zhongjing begins documenting how different combinations of ingredients and freezing techniques affect people with various constitutional types. Individuals with hot constitutions, characterized by high energy, robust digestion, and preference for cool foods, can tolerate more aggressive frozen dessert compositions. They benefit from intensive cooling effects and can handle complex flavor combinations without digestive disruption. Li Bai's adventurous creation, while too extreme for most people, might be ideal for individuals with naturally hot constitutions. Those with cold constitutions, marked by lower energy, slower digestion, and preference for warm foods, require gentler approaches to frozen dessert consumption. Their frozen treats should incorporate warming spices and be consumed in smaller quantities at optimal times of day when digestive fire is strongest. Individuals with damp constitutions, prone to fluid retention and sluggish metabolism, need frozen desserts that include ingredients with drying properties. Ginger, cinnamon, and other warming spices can counteract the moisture-increasing effects of frozen dairy products. Dry constitutions. Characterized by rapid metabolism and tendency toward dehydration, benefit from frozen desserts that emphasize moistening ingredients. However, these individuals must be careful not to consume frozen foods too rapidly, as the sudden temperature change can shock their sensitive systems. Zhang Jing's research extends beyond individual constitution to seasonal appropriateness of frozen dessert consumption. Traditional Chinese medicine emphasizes that dietary choices should harmonize with natural seasonal energy patterns. Summer's hot, expansive energy makes it the ideal season for frozen desserts, as the cooling properties help balance external heat. However, even during summer, timing matters. Early morning consumption of frozen desserts can disrupt the body's natural warming processes as it prepares for daily activity. Late evening consumption can interfere with sleep by creating internal cold when the body should be preparing for rest. The optimal time for frozen dessert consumption appears to be mid-afternoon, when external heat is maximum and the body's digestive fire remains strong. The physician's investigation also reveals important principles about ingredient combination. In frozen dessert creation, certain flavor pairings that work well in regular cooking become problematic when frozen. The concentration of flavors that occurs during the freezing process can intensify bitter or sour tastes to unpleasant levels while muting subtle aromatics. Sweet and salty combinations, properly balanced, can enhance each other even when frozen. However, the proportion must be adjusted to account for how freezing affects taste perception. Salty flavors become more prominent when frozen, while sweet flavors may seem diminished, requiring careful recalibration of recipes. Spicy elements require particular attention in frozen dessert creation. Heat from peppers or ginger creates interesting contrast with cold temperatures. But the delayed onset of spicy sensations in frozen foods can lead to overconsumption before the heat becomes apparent. This delayed reaction contributed to Li Bai's digestive distress. Zhang Jing's medical investigations lead to the development of diagnostic techniques specifically for frozen dessert-related ailments. Pulse reading reveals characteristic patterns associated with different types of temperature-related digestive disruption. Tongue examination shows specific coding patterns that indicate internal cold accumulation or conflicting temperature influences. Treatment protocols for frozen dessert-induced digestive problems emphasize restoration of internal temperature balance through herbal medicine and dietary adjustment. Warming herbs like dried ginger and cinnamon help restore digestive fire. Curaguting herbs like chen pai aged tangerine peel help resolve stagnation caused by sudden temperature changes. Recovery diets emphasize warm, easily digestible foods that gradually restore normal digestive function. Hot grain porridges, gently steamed vegetables, and warming teas help the body process residual cold from frozen dessert consumption while providing necessary nutrition during the recovery period. The physician's research attracts attention from Master Chef Wang. It recognizes that this medical knowledge could revolutionize frozen dessert creation techniques. Collaboration between medical expertise and culinary skill promises to create frozen delicacies that provide pleasure without physiological cost. Together, they develop preparation techniques that minimize the digestive challenges associated with frozen dessert consumption. Gradual temperature reduction during the freezing process creates smoother textures that require less digestive effort. Strategic placement of warming spices neutralizes excessive cooling effects without compromising flavor profiles pre-consumption. Preparation rituals help ready the body for frozen dessert enjoyment. Gentle movement exercises warm the digestive system. Breathing techniques calm the nervous system and prepare it for unusual sensory experiences. Even simple awareness of proper eating pace can prevent the digestive shock that results from consuming Frozen foods too rapidly dot the integration of medical principles into frozen. Dessert creation establishes precedents that will influence Chinese culinary development for centuries. The demonstration that food can be both pleasurable and health-supporting validates Confucian ideals about the harmony between human culture and natural principles. Modern Chinese medicine practitioners studying Tang Dynasty medical texts continue to find relevant principles in Zhang Zhongjing's research on frozen dessert consumption. His insights into constitutional appropriateness and seasonal timing remain valid guides for contemporary dietary therapy. The scientific understanding of sweet serenity proves to be more complex than simple pleasure-seeking. True enjoyment of frozen delicacies requires wisdom that bridges culinary skill, medical knowledge, and philosophical understanding of harmony between human desires and natural law. In his medical study, where oil lamps continue to burn through the night, Zhang Zhongjing completes his documentation of the first systematic investigation into the physiological effects of frozen dessert consumption. His work establishes the foundation for approaching culinary innovation with the same rigor and wisdom that Chinese civilization brings to all worthy endeavors. Chapter 5. The Merchants and the Ice Road's dawn breaks over the bustling commercial district of Chang'an as merchant Xiao Mingdi adjusts the canvas covers, protecting his most precious cargo. Hidden beneath layers of straw and silk cloth lie blocks of winter ice, each piece representing a small fortune in summer currency. The success of yesterday's imperial poetry competition has created something unprecedented in Chinese commercial history. A market for luxury frozen desserts that promises to transform seasonal ice from royal privilege into profitable trade commodity. Xiao Ming's warehouse, located strategically near the palace district but accessible to merchant traffic, has become the center of frantic activity as word spreads throughout the capital about the emperor's new culinary fascination. Servants from noble households arrive with silver in hand, seeking to recreate the frozen delicacies that court gossip has elevated to legendary status. Master Chef Wang's techniques, carefully observed during yesterday's competition, are being adapted by ambitious cooks who understand that social prestige often flows from successful imitation of imperial fashions. The challenge facing Xiao Mingdi and his fellow merchants involves more than simple supply and demand. The creation of a sustainable market for frozen desserts requires solving logistical problems that no Chinese commercial enterprise has previously attempted. How do you maintain the cold chain necessary to deliver ice from storage to customer? How do you price products that literally melt away if not consumed immediately? How do you train kitchen staff in techniques that combine luxury service with precise timing? The ice storage facilities that Xiao Mingdi has constructed represent innovations in commercial architecture that dissipate developments in refrigeration technology by centuries. Working with builders experienced in palace ice chamber construction, he has created smaller-scale versions of the imperial storage systems. These commercial ice houses use the same principles of thermal insulation and air circulation while incorporating design elements that facilitate frequent access and inventory management. The sourcing of ice for commercial use requires establishing supply networks that can deliver consistent quality and quantity throughout the summer months. Xiao Ming's agents travel to mountain lakes and rivers each winter, establishing relationships with local communities who can harvest ice to specifications that meet urban market demands. The transportation of this ice to Chang'an requires coordination that rivals military logistics, with relay stations providing temporary storage and protection from heat. The standardization of ice block sizes becomes crucial for efficient storage and pricing. Xiao Mingdi develops a system of graduated measurements that allows customers to purchase exactly the amount of ice needed for different-sized frozen dessert preparations. Small blocks serve individual household needs, while larger blocks accommodate the requirements of noble families entertaining guests. But the technical challenges of ice commerce pale before the social and cultural obstacles that Xiao Mingdi must navigate. Traditional Chinese commercial practices have no precedents for selling products that exist only temporarily. The concept of paying significant sums for experiences that last mere moments challenges fundamental assumptions about value in exchange that govern established merchant relationships. The solution emerges through careful observation of how imperial court culture influences broader social trends. The desire to emulate palace sophistication creates demand that transcends purely rational economic calculation. Wealthy merchants and noble families are willing to pay premium prices for frozen desserts not just because they taste good, but because they demonstrate familiarity with the latest imperial fashions. Xiao Mingdi develops marketing strategies that emphasize the cultural significance of frozen dessert consumption rather than merely its sensory pleasures. His sales presentations describe the philosophical principles underlying different flavor combinations, the poetic inspiration that guides ingredient selection, and the social appropriateness of serving frozen delicacies at various types of gatherings. The training of kitchen staff to prepare frozen desserts represents another commercial innovation. Xiao Mingdi establishes what amounts to the world's first culinary school, specializing in frozen dessert preparation. Students learn not only the technical aspects of ingredient mixing and temperature control, but also the aesthetic principles that distinguish sophistication. Frozen desserts from crude mixtures of ice and flavoring. The curriculum includes lessons in recognizing optimal ingredient quality, understanding how different flavors behave when frozen, mastering the timing required for proper texture development, and developing presentation skills that enhance the visual appeal of finished products. Advanced students learn to adapt basic techniques for different seasonal ingredients and varying customer preferences. The economic implications of the emerging frozen dessert trade extend far beyond Xiao Ming's immediate business interests. Dairy farmers discover new markets for their highest quality cream and milk. Spice merchants find increased demand for exotic flavorings that work well in frozen applications. Even silk producers benefit as demand grows for the fine fabrics used to insulate ice during transportation. The seasonal nature of ice availability creates unique patterns of economic activity that influence labor markets and investment strategies. Throughout the region, winter ice harvesting employs thousands of workers during the coldest months when other outdoor work is impossible. Summer ice storage and processing provides employment for different groups of workers who specialize in the rapid production and delivery of frozen desserts. The development of credit and insurance systems for the ice trade represents another commercial innovation. The high value and perishable nature of ice cargo requires financial instruments that can manage risks unknown to traditional Chinese commerce. Xiao Mingdi works with money changers and guild leaders to develop contracts that fairly allocate the risks of transportation delays, storage failures, and market fluctuations. The expansion of frozen dessert popularity beyond the capital requires establishing distribution networks that can maintain cold chains over long distances. Xiao Ming's agents scout routes between major cities, identifying locations where ice can be stored temporarily during extended transportation. These relay stations become focal points for regional frozen desert markets as local entrepreneurs recognize opportunities to serve travelers and residents. The standardization of preparation techniques allows for quality control across multiple locations while accommodating regional preferences in flavoring and presentation. Recipe collections document successful combinations that can be replicated by trained practitioners, while technical manuals provide troubleshooting guidance for common problems encountered in frozen dessert preparation. The social implications of commercialized frozen dessert consumption prove as significant as the economic effects. The availability of imperial-style delicacies to wealthy merchants and minor nobility challenges traditional hierarchies that restrict luxury consumption to court circles. This democratization of palace culture creates new forms of social competition and status display. Wedding banquets begin featuring frozen dessert courses that demonstrate both financial prosperity and cultural sophistication. Business entertainment incorporates frozen delicacies as symbols of success and international awareness. Even religious festivals adapt to include frozen offerings that honor deities while providing sensory pleasures appropriate to celebratory occasions. The international dimensions of the frozen dessert trade emerge as foreign merchants and diplomats experience these delicacies during visits to Chang'an. Demand develops for Chinese frozen dessert techniques and ingredients in distant markets, creating export opportunities for specialized products and services. Trading relationships with Central Asian and Indian merchants expand to include exchanges of exotic spices, specifically valued for frozen desert applications. The documentation of successful frozen desert recipes creates one of the world's first systematic culinary literature focused on a specific food category. These recipe collections preserve not only ingredient proportions and preparation techniques, but also cultural context about appropriate occasions for serving different types of frozen desserts. The preservation of this knowledge ensures that the innovations developed during the Tang Dynasty will influence Chinese culinary traditions for centuries. Future generations of Chinese cooks will look back on this period as the foundation for understanding how foreign techniques and ingredients can be adapted to Chinese aesthetic and philosophical principles. Quality control systems developed to ensure that commercial frozen desserts maintain the standards established by imperial palace practitioners. Xiaomingdi institutes inspection procedures that verify ingredient quality, preparation techniques, and final product standards. These quality assurance systems become models for other luxury food industries. The training of quality inspectors requires developing standardized criteria for evaluating frozen dessert excellence. Texture, flavor, balance, visual presentation, and cultural appropriateness all become measurable qualities that can be consistently evaluated across different preparation locations and practitioners. The success of commercial frozen dessert enterprises validates the economic principles underlying Porny Calling's tasteables. Underlying luxury goods markets in medieval China. The demonstration that significant profits can be generated through the sale of ephemeral pleasures influences investment strategies and commercial development in other sectors of the economy. Zhao Mingzi's business records, carefully maintained according to Chinese commercial traditions, provide detailed documentation of the economic impact created by the emerging frozen dessert industry. These records show how innovation in one sector creates opportunities throughout the economy while demonstrating the importance of cultural factors in determining market success. Modern economists studying Tang Dynasty commercial records continue to find relevant insights in the development of frozen dessert markets. The strategies used to commercialize imperial culinary innovations anticipate marketing techniques and distribution challenges that remain relevant to contemporary luxury goods industries. The merchants and the ice roads prove that commercial success requires more than simple supply and demand calculations. True business achievement emerges from understanding how cultural trends, technological innovation, and economic opportunity can be combined to create markets that enhance both individual prosperity and broader social sophistication. In the warehouses, where Xiaomingdi continues to manage the delicate balance between ice preservation and market demands, the foundations are being laid for commercial enterprises that will influence Chinese business culture for generations. The transformation of imperial luxury into profitable commerce demonstrates the dynamic relationship between cultural innovation and economic development that characterizes the greatest civilizations. Chapter 6. The Monastery and the Melting Meditation Brother. Xuanzang pauses in his morning meditation as an unusual sound drifts through the windows of the Temple of Transcendent Wisdom, the gentle scraping of wooden paddles against bronze vessels, accompanied by rhythmic chanting that seems to blend seamlessly with the traditional sutras echoing from the main hall. The monastery, located just outside Chang'an's walls, has become an unexpected center for the development of what the monks are calling frozen meditation, a practice that combines the emerging art of frozen dessert creation with Buddhist principles of mindfulness and impermanence. The integration of culinary innovation with spiritual practice began when Abbot Huning, renowned for his teachings on sudden enlightenment, attended yesterday's imperial poetry competition as guest of Emperor Xuanzang. The abbot's keen mind immediately recognized profound philosophical implications in the temporary nature of frozen desserts and the meditative concentration required for their proper preparation. "Consider, my brother's abbot," Huineng addresses the assembled monks in the monastery's adapted kitchen, where bronze freezing vessels now occupy positions traditionally reserved for incense burners and meditation cushions. How the creation of frozen delicacies mirrors fundamental Buddhist teachings about the nature of existence. These beautiful confections arise from specific causes and conditions, exist briefly in perfect form, then dissolve back into their constituent elements. They embody the doctrine of impermanence in ways that make abstract philosophical concepts tangible through direct experience. The monks, initially skeptical about introducing culinary activities into their spiritual practice, discover that frozen dessert creation demands exactly the kind of sustained concentration that characterizes effective meditation. The timing required for optimal texture development cannot be rushed or delayed without compromising results. The stirring motions must be maintained with rhythmic consistency that mirrors breathing meditation. The temperature monitoring requires present moment awareness that prevents the mind from wandering into past regrets or future anxieties. Brother Xuanzang finds himself assigned to work with Brother Fazang on developing a frozen dessert that embodies the monastery's teachings about the middle way, avoiding extremes of indulgence and deprivation. Their creation uses modest ingredients: fresh milk from the monastery's own cows, honey from beehives maintained by the gardening monks, and delicate green tea grown in the monastery's mountain gardens. The preparation process becomes a moving meditation as the two monks coordinate their stirring efforts with synchronized breathing. Brother Xuanzang maintains steady paddle rhythm while Brother Fazang monitors temperature and adjusts the eye-salt mixture. Their coordination requires the kind of wordless communication that characterizes advanced meditation partnerships. Brother Fazang, Xuanzang observes as their mixture begins developing the smooth texture that indicates successful freezing. This practice teaches patience in ways that sitting meditation sometimes cannot. When my mind becomes restless during zazen, I can still maintain proper posture and breathing. But restless stirring ruins frozen desserts immediately. The ingredients demand complete present moment attention. The monastery's adaptation of frozen dessert techniques incorporates Buddhist principles in ways that would surprise the imperial court practitioners. Where palace cooks focus on elaborate flavor combinations and visual presentation, the monks emphasize simplicity, seasonal appropriateness, and mindful consumption. Their frozen desserts use only ingredients produced within the monastery or obtained through ethical trade relationships. The flavoring choices reflect Buddhist dietary principles that avoid stimulating spices and excessive sweetness. Subtle tea infusions provide gentle flavor without overstimulating the senses. Seasonal fruits, used in perfect ripeness, offer natural sweetness that doesn't create the attachment and craving associated with heavily sweetened foods. Even the timing of consumption follows monastic schedules that promote health and spiritual clarity. Abbot Huining develops what becomes known as impermanence meditation, using frozen desserts as teaching tools. Monks observe their creations throughout the melting process. noting how attachment and aversion arise in response to the dessert's changing forms. The practice cultivates equanimity toward gain and loss, pleasure and disappointment, success and failure. Watch carefully. The abbot instructs novice monks as they observe perfectly crafted frozen desserts gradually melting in the monastery's warm reception hall. How the mind creates stories about what should last forever and what should change. Quickly, notice the arising of desire to preserve what cannot be preserved, and the emergence of wisdom that accepts transformation as natural law. The meditation practices developed around frozen dessert creation prove particularly effective for novice monks struggling with traditional sitting meditation. The concrete nature of the work provides focus points for scattered attention, while the immediate feedback from temperature and texture changes teaches the consequences of mental distraction. Advanced practitioners discovered that frozen dessert creation offers opportunities for developing what Buddhist psychology calls one-pointed concentration. The complex coordination required for successful preparation engages multiple aspects of consciousness simultaneously while training the mind to maintain awareness without becoming overwhelmed by sensory input. The monastery begins hosting teaching sessions where lay practitioners can learn both frozen dessert techniques and the Buddhist principles that guide their application. These sessions attract wealthy merchants and court officials who initially come for culinary instruction but gradually develop interest in the spiritual dimensions of mindful food preparation. The integration of frozen dessert creation with traditional Buddhist ceremonies creates new forms of offering practice. Frozen delicacies become suitable presentations for special occasions, their impermanent nature making them particularly appropriate symbols of non-attachment. The preparation process itself becomes a form of dana generous giving, as monks offer their time and timesin without expectation of reward. The monastery's approach to ingredient sourcing reflects Buddhist economics that prioritize ethical relationships over maximum profit. Milk comes from cows treated with compassion, according to Buddhist animal welfare principles. Honey is gathered using techniques that don't harm bee colonies. Even the ice used for freezing is harvested from mountain streams in ways that don't disturb natural ecosystems. The seasonal adaptation of monastery frozen dessert practices follows Buddhist calendar rhythms rather than commercial considerations. Spring desserts emphasize renewal and fresh beginnings using early herbs and flowers. Summer creations celebrate abundance while teaching moderation. Autumn flavors incorporate harvest fruits while reflecting on impermanence. Winter preparations use preserved ingredients while cultivating patience during seasons of scarcity. The medical dimensions of Buddhist frozen dessert practice reflect traditional understanding of food as medicine. Monastery practitioners develop frozen desserts specifically designed to balance different constitutional types and seasonal needs. Cooling desserts help monks cope with summer heat without compromising digestive health. Warming spices in frozen preparations prevent excessive cooling that might disrupt meditation practice. The documentation of monastery frozen dessert techniques creates what may be the world's first systematic integration of culinary practice with formal spiritual training. The detailed records maintained by monastery scribes preserve not only recipes and preparation methods, but also observations about how different practices affect meditation quality and spiritual development. The training curriculum developed for teaching frozen dessert meditation includes instruction in Buddhist philosophy, practical meditation techniques, culinary skills, and the integration of physical work with spiritual practice. Students learn to recognize how mental states affect their preparation results while developing concentration skills that enhance both cooking ability and meditation depth. The monastery's reputation for innovative spiritual practices attracts visitors from other Buddhist institutions throughout China and beyond. Delegations of monks travel from India, Tibet, and Southeast Asia to study the integration of frozen dessert creation with traditional meditation techniques. These exchanges spread Buddhist frozen dessert practices throughout the international Buddhist community. The philosophical implications of frozen dessert meditation extend beyond immediate practical applications. The monastery's theoretical developments contribute to Buddhist understanding of how sensory pleasures can be used skillfully as spiritual practice rather than obstacles to enlightenment. This insight influences broader approaches to integrating worldly activities with religious training. The community service dimensions of monastery frozen dessert practice include sharing their creations with poor and sick members of the local community. The monks understand that offering physical comfort through cooling foods during hot weather embodies Buddhist compassion in practical form. These charitable distributions become regular features of monastery social engagement. The preservation of monastery frozen dessert traditions ensures that this unique synthesis of culinary innovation and spiritual practice will influence Buddhist culture for centuries. Future generations of Buddhist practitioners will have access to techniques that demonstrate how any activity, pursued with proper attention and intention, can become a vehicle for spiritual development, the environmental consciousness embedded in monastery frozen dessert practices anticipates ecological concerns that won't become widespread for centuries. The monks' emphasis on seasonal ingredients, local sourcing, and minimal waste demonstrates how spiritual principles naturally lead to sustainable practices. Modern Buddhist practitioners studying Tang Dynasty monastery records continue to find relevant insights in the integration of frozen dessert creation with meditation practice. The principles developed by Abbot Huineng and his community remained applicable to contemporary efforts to integrate mindfulness with daily activities. The monastery and the melting meditation prove that spiritual practice can embrace rather than reject sensory pleasures when approached with proper understanding and intention. The temporary nature of frozen desserts, rather than being obstacles to spiritual development, becomes a perfect metaphor for Buddhist teachings about the impermanent nature of all conditioned existence. In the monastery kitchen, where Brother Xuanzang continues his practice of mindful frozen dessert creation, ancient wisdom finds new expression through innovative techniques that nourish both body and spirit. The integration of culinary skill with spiritual insight demonstrates how the greatest religious traditions remain vibrant by adapting to new circumstances while preserving essential truths. Chapter 7. The Children and the Crystal Palace's Young. Maylin presses her face against the carved wooden screen that separates the palace kitchens from the formal reception halls. Her 8-year-old eyes wide with wonder as servants carry gleaming bowls of frozen delicacies toward the assembled court officials. As daughter of the head palace administrator, she enjoys privileges that most children never experience. But today, she witnesses something that even palace children have never seen before: the transformation of simple cream and fruit into magical creations that sparkle like captured starlight. The imperial decision to include children in frozen desert education reflects Emperor Xuanzang's understanding that culinary innovations must be transmitted to future generations if they are to become permanent features of Chinese culture. The children of noble families and high-ranking court officials are being taught not only to appreciate these new delicacies, but to understand the principles that govern their creation. Master Chef Wang, assisted by the gentle teacher Lin, who specializes in instructing young nobles, has adapted frozen dessert techniques for small hands and developing palates. The children's preparation area features miniature versions of adult equipment, small bronze vessels for freezing, child-sized wooden paddles for stirring, and measuring cups proportioned for their limited strength and coordination. Young masters and mistresses, teacher Lin announces to the assembled group of palace children. Today you will learn that cooking is not mere necessity, but art that requires the same patience and attention that you bring to calligraphy practice. The frozen delicacies you create must please not only the tongue, but the eye and mind. 10-year-old Prince Ning, the emperor's youngest son, approaches the challenge with characteristic determination. His creation will be presented to his father at the evening meal, creating pressure that would intimidate adult cooks. But Prince Ning possesses the fearless creativity that often produces the most innovative results. His chosen ingredients reflect both childish preference and sophisticated understanding gained through palace exposure to diverse culinary traditions. Sweet osmanthus flowers provide delicate fragrance that appeals to refined taste, while crystallized ginger offers the exciting contrast that children crave. Fresh lychee, carefully peeled to remove every trace of tough skin, adds textural interest and natural sweetness. The preparation process becomes an exercise in patience that challenges young attention spans while teaching valuable life lessons. The stirring required for proper texture development cannot be rushed, no matter how eager the children become to taste their creations. The temperature monitoring demands sustained attention that builds concentration skills. Applicable to academic studies. Mei-Lin works carefully with ingredients chosen for their visual appeal as much as flavor. White peach provides pale color that contrasts beautifully with dark purple mulberries. Crushed rose petals add floral notes that seem appropriate for a girl's creation while demonstrating sophisticated understanding of flavor layering. Her mixture develops the delicate pink color of spring cherry blossoms. Teacher Mei-Lin asks, while maintaining steady, stirring rhythm, "Why do the colors change as the mixture freezes? My pink is becoming deeper, and Prince Ning's white is turning golden." The question reveals the observational skills that distinguish exceptional students. Teacher Lin uses Mei-Lin's observation to explain principles of chemistry and physics that university scholars struggle to understand. The concentration of flavors during freezing affects color intensity, while different ingredients respond to cold in ways that create subtle transformations throughout the preparation process. The children's natural curiosity leads to experimental approaches that surprise adult supervisors. Young Lord Chen, son of a prominent general, decides to incorporate elements from his favorite breakfast porridge into his frozen creation. Crushed walnuts and dates, combined with honey and cream, create flavors that bridge familiar comfort foods with exotic new techniques. The social dynamics among the children mirror broader court relationships while creating unique opportunities for learning, cooperation, and friendly competition. Higher-ranking children must demonstrate leadership while respecting the expertise of Master Chef Wang and Teacher Lin. Lower status children can achieve recognition through superior results regardless of their family positions. The seasonal education, incorporated into children's frozen dessert training, teaches broader lessons about Chinese agricultural and cultural rhythms. Spring creations emphasize fresh, delicate flavors that celebrate renewal and growth. Summer desserts provide cooling relief while demonstrating abundance. Autumn preparations incorporate preserved fruits, while teaching lessons about preparing for winter scarcity. The children's smaller scale preparations allow for experimental approaches that would be too risky for adult competitions. Failed experiments become learning opportunities rather than social embarrassments. Successful innovations developed by children sometimes influence adult techniques when scaled up for formal presentations. Young Lady Zhang, daughter of a famous calligrapher, brings artistic sensibilities to her frozen dessert creation that emphasize visual composition over pure flavor considerations. Her arrangement of different colored ingredients creates patterns that resemble landscape paintings, with white cream representing clouds, green tea providing mountain colors, and red berries suggesting autumn maples. The integration of frozen dessert creation with traditional children's education demonstrates how practical skills can reinforce academic learning. Mathematics lessons become concrete through measuring ingredients and calculating freezing times. Geography studies gain relevance through discussions of ingredient origins and trade routes. Poetry appreciation develops through composing verses that capture the essence of culinary creations. The children's presentations to adult audiences create opportunities for developing public speaking skills and confidence in formal settings. Each child must explain their ingredient choices, describe their preparation process, and recite an original poem that complements their frozen creation. These presentations become exercises in comprehensive education that integrate multiple skills and knowledge areas. The preservation of children's innovations ensures that youthful creativity contributes to the ongoing development of frozen dessert. Traditions. Some combinations discovered through childish experimentation prove superior to adult creations when properly refined. The documentation of successful children's recipes creates a special category of frozen desserts, known for their playful creativity and innocent appeal. The medical considerations surrounding children's consumption of frozen desserts receive particular attention from palace physicians. Young digestive systems respond differently to extreme temperatures and rich ingredients, requiring modified recipes and serving sizes. The development of child-appropriate frozen desserts becomes a specialty that influences pediatric nutrition. Throughout the empire, the training of servants who specialize in children's frozen dessert preparation requires understanding both culinary technique and child psychology. These specialists learn to manage young attention spans while maintaining safety standards and quality control. Their expertise becomes valuable in noble households throughout Chang'an as frozen dessert popularity spreads beyond the palace. The educational curriculum developed for teaching children frozen dessert appreciation includes lessons in etiquette and social appropriateness. Children learn when frozen desserts are suitable for different occasions, how to consume them gracefully in formal settings, and how to appreciate the work that goes into their creation. These lessons in culinary culture become part of broader training in social sophistication, the international dimensions of children's frozen dessert education include exposure to foreign techniques and ingredients through diplomatic visits and cultural exchanges. Children from visiting delegations share their own traditions while learning Chinese methods. These cultural exchanges create early exposure to international perspectives that will influence future diplomatic and commercial relationships. The documentation of children's frozen dessert activities creates unique historical records that preserve childhood experiences in medieval China. These records provide insights into palace life, educational methods, and family relationships that complement more formal historical documentation. Future historians will find valuable social and cultural information in accounts of children's culinary education. The long-term impact of childhood exposure to frozen dessert creation extends far beyond immediate enjoyment. Adults who learned these techniques as children become naturally skilled practitioners who can adapt and innovate throughout their lives. The early exposure to principles of temperature control, flavor balance, and aesthetic presentation influences their approach to other aspects of food and culture. The gender-neutral nature of children's frozen dessert education challenges traditional assumptions about appropriate activities for boys and girls. Prince Ning's success with delicate flavor combinations demonstrates that culinary sensitivity isn't limited to females, while Meilin's technical mastery shows that girls can excel in activities requiring precision and scientific understanding. The children's enthusiasm for frozen dessert creation influences adult attitudes toward culinary innovation and experimentation. Parents who observe their children's successful adaptations of traditional techniques become more open to accepting changes in established customs. The younger generation becomes agents of cultural transformation that might face resistance if introduced only through adult channels. Modern child development specialists studying Tang Dynasty educational records find evidence of sophisticated understanding of how hands-on learning enhances academic development. The integration of practical skills with formal education anticipated pedagogical principles that weren't formally recognized till centuries later. The children and the crystal palaces prove that cultural innovations achieve lasting impact when transmitted to new generations through education that combines practical skills with underlying principles. The young palace students who learned to create frozen delicacies alongside their traditional studies became adults who understood that excellence in any field requires the same fundamental qualities: patience, attention to detail, willingness to experiment, and appreciation for both tradition and innovation. In the palace courtyards where Meilin and her companions continue to practice their frozen dessert techniques, the foundations are being laid for cultural traditions that will influence Chinese cuisine and education for centuries. The crystal palaces they create may melt within hours, but the knowledge and appreciation they develop will last lifetimes, ensuring that the innovations of the Tang Dynasty will be preserved and transmitted through the most reliable mechanism. Any civilization possesses the eager hands and curious minds of children, learning to transform simple ingredients into magic. Chapter 8. The Foreign. Merchants and the Silk Road flavors. The camel caravan stretches across the dusty courtyard of the Western market like a segmented dragon. Each animal loaded with precious cargo that has traveled thousands of miles from the far reaches of the Silk Road. But today, among the usual treasures of silk, spices, and precious stones, merchant Hassan al-Baghdadi carries something unprecedented: detailed recipes and techniques for creating frozen delicacies that have captured the imagination of Tang Dynasty court culture. Hassan's journey to Chang'an began 6 months ago in the great markets of Baghdad, where rumors of Chinese innovations in frozen dessert creation reached the ears of merchants who specialize in luxury goods. The descriptions seemed fantastic: ice preserved through summer months, cream transformed into solid yet yielding textures, flavors from across the known world combined in ways that created entirely new taste experiences. The verification of these rumors required diplomatic skills that extended far beyond simple commercial negotiation. Hassan's trade network includes Persian icehouse operators, Indian spice merchants, Arabian date cultivators, and Central Asian honey producers. Each contact provided pieces of information that gradually assembled into a comprehensive understanding of the techniques being developed in the Chinese capital. The ingredients Hassan has transported to Chang'an represent a survey of luxury food products from across the medieval world. Saffron from Kashmir, its golden threads more valuable than gold and capable of transforming simple cream into liquid sunshine. Cardamom pods from the mountains of India, their intense aromatic oils perfect for creating exotic frozen preparations. Pistachios from Persia, their delicate green color and subtle nutty flavor ideal for both flavoring and decoration. But Hassan's most precious cargo consists of preserved fruits that have never been available in Chinese markets. Dates stuffed with almonds and rolled in crushed pearls represent the pinnacle of Arabian confectionery art. Dried figs from Syria, their concentrated sweetness balanced by complex mineral flavors. Candied rose petals from Persian gardens, their floral intensity carefully preserved through sophisticated preservation techniques. The challenge facing Hassan involves more than simply introducing foreign ingredients to Chinese consumers. Success requires understanding Chinese aesthetic principles well enough to adapt foreign flavors to local preferences while maintaining the exotic appeal that justifies premium pricing. His frozen dessert creations must seem authentically Chinese while offering experiences unavailable through domestic ingredients. The collaboration between Hassan and Master Chef Wang represents a meeting of culinary traditions that spans continents and cultures. Hassan's knowledge of Middle Eastern and Central Asian flavor combinations complements Master Chef Wang's understanding of Chinese cooking principles and frozen dessert techniques. Together, they work to create fusion preparations that honor both traditions while achieving something entirely new. Their first experimental creation combines Hassan's saffron and cardamom with Master Chef Wang's osmanthus flour and pine nut base. The result challenges conventional assumptions about flavor compatibility, while demonstrating that skilled practitioners can find harmony between seemingly incompatible elements. The saffron provides exotic luxury appeal, while the osmanthus offers familiar Chinese refinement. The economic implications of Hassan's innovations extend far beyond his immediate commercial interests. The successful introduction of foreign ingredients into Chinese frozen dessert preparations creates new demand for luxury imports while demonstrating Chinese cultural sophistication to international observers. The Tang Dynasty's ability to absorb and improve foreign innovations reinforces its reputation as the most advanced civilization of the medieval world. The documentation of Hassan's recipes creates valuable commercial intelligence that influences trade relationships throughout the trade. It's throughout the Silk Road network. Chinese techniques for preserving ice and creating frozen desserts represent technological innovations that foreign merchants can adapt to their own markets. The exchange of knowledge accompanies the exchange of goods in ways that strengthen commercial and cultural relationships. The seasonal availability of different foreign ingredients requires coordination between Hassan's supply network and Chinese market demands. Spring arrivals of preserved fruits from Central Asian oases must be timed to coincide with peak demand for frozen dessert innovations. Summer deliveries of aromatic spices from Indian mountains arrive when their cooling properties can be most appreciated. The training of Chinese cooks in foreign ingredient handling techniques represents another dimension of Hassan's commercial activities. Saffron requires specific preparation methods to release its full flavor potential. Cardamom pods must be processed at exactly the right stage to balance intensity with subtlety. Even the dried fruits demand understanding of how preservation affects texture and sweetness, the cultural education that accompanies Hassan's ingredient introductions include stories and traditions that give context to foreign flavors. Chinese consumers learn about Persian garden cultivation methods that produce the finest rose petals. They hear descriptions of Arabian oasis agriculture that creates perfect date harvests. These cultural narratives enhance the exotic appeal of foreign ingredients, while building appreciation for international craftsmanship. The adaptation of foreign ingredients to Chinese frozen dessert techniques reveals principles of culinary translation that apply to broader cultural exchange. Successful adaptation requires understanding the essential qualities that make foreign elements attractive while modifying presentation methods to suit local aesthetic preferences. The most successful fusion creations honor both traditions while achieving unified artistic expression. Hassan's commercial success attracts other foreign merchants who recognize opportunities for introducing their own specialty ingredients to Chinese frozen dessert markets. Greek merchants offer crystallized honey preparations. Indian traders provide exotic fruits preserved through tropical techniques. Even merchants from distant lands beyond normal trade networks begin appearing with ingredients specifically intended for frozen dessert applications. The competitive pressures created by multiple foreign merchants drive innovation in both ingredients and preparation techniques. Hassan must constantly develop new combinations and presentation methods to maintain his market position against rivals, who copy his basic approaches while offering their own specialty ingredients. The resulting competition benefits Chinese consumers, while pushing frozen dessert artistry to higher levels of sophistication. The diplomatic dimensions of Hassan's activities include serving as cultural ambassador for the broader Islamic world. His successful integration into Chinese court culture demonstrates the possibilities for peaceful cultural exchange and mutual benefit. The positive reception of his innovations influences Chinese attitudes toward foreign merchants and encourages expanded trade. Relationships. The preservation of Hassan's recipes and techniques ensures that his contributions to Chinese culinary culture will outlast his individual commercial activities. The documentation system developed for recording foreign ingredient applications becomes a model for systematically incorporating international innovations into Chinese cultural traditions. The training of Chinese assistants in Hassan's techniques creates ongoing capacity for working with foreign ingredients, even when direct access to international suppliers becomes difficult. These trained practitioners become resources for other merchants and cooks who want to incorporate foreign elements into their own frozen dessert preparations. The influence of Hassan's innovations extends beyond frozen dessert applications to affect broader Chinese culinary development. Spices and flavoring techniques introduced through frozen dessert experimentation find applications in conventional cooking methods. The expanded palette of available tastes influences Chinese cuisine in ways that persist long after the initial novelty of frozen desserts subsides. The medical evaluation of foreign ingredients requires collaboration between Hassan's traditional knowledge and Chinese medical theory. Persian understanding of saffron's medicinal properties must be integrated with Chinese principles of constitutional balance and seasonal appropriateness. The resulting synthesis creates more sophisticated approaches to using foreign ingredients. Healthfully, the quality control systems developed for foreign ingredient evaluation establish standards that influence broader import trade practices. The methods used to verify saffron authenticity become applicable to other luxury imports. The techniques for assessing dried fruit quality influence standards for conventional food imports. Modern historians studying Silk Road trade relationships find valuable insights in the documentation of Hassan's commercial activities. His records provide detailed information about international supply networks, cross-cultural commercial practices, and the mechanisms through which technological innovations spread between civilizations. The foreign merchants and the Silk Road flavors prove that cultural innovation achieves its highest expression when different traditions meet and learn from each other. Hassan's success demonstrates that commercial relationships can become vehicles for cultural exchange that enriches all participants, while creating new possibilities that neither tradition could achieve alone. In the warehouses where Hassan continues to blend Arabian luxury with Chinese sophistication, the foundations are being laid for international culinary traditions that will influence global cuisine for centuries. The Silk Road flavors that he introduced to Tang Dynasty frozen desserts represent more than simple ingredient additions. They embody the principle that the greatest achievements of human civilization emerge from the creative interaction between diverse cultures and traditions. Epilogue. The eternal sweetness master Chef Wang sets down his worn wooden paddle for the final time as autumn sunlight streams through the windows of the imperial kitchen, illuminating motes of dust that dance like tiny fragments of the countless frozen delicacies he has created over the past year. At 73, his hands have finally begun to tremble too much for the precise stirring that perfect frozen desserts require. But his eyes still shine with the satisfaction of someone who has witnessed something unprecedented in the history of human culture. The transformation that began with a simple imperial whim to combine poetry with frozen confections has evolved into something far more significant than anyone could have anticipated. What started as a novel entertainment for court poets has become a cultural revolution that influences everything from international trade relationships to childhood education, from religious practice to medical understanding, from social customs to artistic expression. The recipes and techniques developed during that first experimental competition have spread throughout the empire and beyond, carried by merchants, diplomats, monks, and travelers who recognize the significance of what they have witnessed. In the monasteries of Tibet, Buddhist practitioners create frozen meditations that embody principles of impermanence. In the markets of Samarkand, merchants adapt Chinese techniques to local ingredients and Islamic dietary laws. In the palaces of Korea and Japan, courtiers attempt to recreate the sophistication they have heard described in travelers' tales. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the frozen dessert revolution lies not in its geographic spread, but in its demonstration of fundamental principles about human creativity and cultural development. The successful fusion of poetry and cuisine proved that artistic excellence recognizes no boundaries between different forms of expression. The integration of foreign ingredients with Chinese techniques showed that cultural sophistication emerges from openness to outside influences rather than rigid adherence to tradition. Li Bai, in his 60s, but still capable of surprising innovations, has continued developing new frozen dessert compositions that reflect his ongoing poetic evolution. His recent creations incorporate ingredients from the farthest reaches of the Tang Empire: tea from Fujian, fruits from Guangdong, spices from Sichuan, creating edible maps of Chinese territory that celebrate both natural diversity and political unity. Wang Wei's contemplative approach to frozen dessert creation has evolved into a formal aesthetic philosophy that influences multiple art forms. His writings about the relationship between temporary pleasure and permanent beauty have become required reading for students at the Imperial Academy. His techniques for creating visual harmony in edible compositions are being adapted by painters and garden designers who recognize applicable principles. Fu's socially conscious approach to frozen dessert creation has inspired a movement toward what court scholars call people's frozen desserts, simplified preparations using ingredients accessible to common households. His documentation of the economic relationships underlying luxury food production has influenced imperial policies regarding agricultural development and worker welfare. The younger poets who participated in that first competition have become masters in their own right, each developing distinctive approaches that reflect their individual artistic personalities, while contributing to the ongoing evolution of frozen dessert culture. Their students, now adults with students of their own, ensure that the knowledge and appreciation developed during the Tang Dynasty will be transmitted to future generations. The children who learned frozen dessert techniques alongside their traditional studies have grown into adults who view culinary creativity as a natural extension of scholarly and artistic achievement. Princess Meilan, now a young woman preparing for marriage to a Korean prince, will carry Chinese frozen dessert knowledge to foreign courts where her skills will serve diplomatic as well as cultural purposes. The international influence of Li, the international influence of Quit. Meilan now a nun sor, Meilan now a young woman, preparing for marriage, Meilan. We are supploited / was. We are samari quote, 100 play. We are sabilla to play, sabai be aside. I submit our ways, you will be a wise at day. We are with Meilai Lees, we is anda to be so wide said. We may ui to be inside, I may so say clear it is, I make you kai salite to cease to sit to be I set to kabu say sagai, it's to kia plus late to give it to silty look it's gurg to the picket said the resport about the taste Chinese frozen dessert innovations continues to expand as trade relationships carry both techniques and ingredients to distant markets. Arabian merchants have developed their own versions using local dairy products and desert-adapted preservation methods. Indian practitioners have created spiced frozen preparations that complement their climate and cuisine. Even European visitors to Chinese trading posts have begun carrying descriptions of frozen dessert techniques back to their distant homelands. The medical understanding developed through systematic study of frozen dessert consumption has contributed to advances in Chinese nutritional theory that extend far beyond dessert applications. The constitutional analysis methods pioneered by physician Zhang Zhongjing are being applied to broader dietary therapy practices. The seasonal adaptation principles discovered through frozen dessert research influence agricultural planning and food preservation throughout the empire. The economic impact of the frozen dessert industry has proven more significant than initial projections suggested. The commercial networks established by merchant Xiao Mingdi and his colleagues have created economic opportunities throughout the supply chain while demonstrating how luxury goods markets can drive broader economic development. The credit and insurance systems developed for ICE commerce have become models for other high-value, time-sensitive trade sectors. The technological innovations driven by frozen dessert development have found applications in other areas of Chinese manufacturing and agriculture. Ice preservation techniques are being adapted for food storage and medical applications. Temperature control methods developed for frozen dessert preparation influence metallurgy and ceramics production. Even the timing and coordination systems developed for large-scale dessert preparation are being applied to other complex manufacturing processes. The cultural influence of frozen desert traditions has become embedded in Chinese social customs in ways that will persist for centuries. Wedding celebrations routinely include frozen dessert courses that symbolize the sweetness of marital harmony. Religious festivals incorporate frozen offerings that honor deities while providing appropriate seasonal refreshment. Business entertainment uses frozen dessert service to demonstrate sophistication and hospitality. The preservation of frozen dessert knowledge through written documentation, apprenticeship systems, and institutional memory ensures that these innovations will survive the political changes and social upheavals that periodically affect all civilizations. The techniques developed during the Tang Dynasty have become sufficiently integrated into Chinese culture that they represent permanent additions to human knowledge rather than temporary fashions. The philosophical implications of frozen dessert culture continue to influence Chinese intellectual development in ways that extend far beyond immediate culinary applications. The demonstration that pleasure and wisdom can be combined rather than oppose challenges traditional assumptions about the relationship between sensory enjoyment and spiritual development. The proof that temporary beauty can have permanent value influences aesthetic theory across multiple art forms. Modern scholars studying Tang Dynasty cultural innovations continue to discover new aspects of the frozen desert revolution that reveal its significance in the broader context of Chinese civilization. Archaeological evidence from palace sites provides details about preparation techniques and serving customs. Literary references in poems and essays show how frozen desert imagery became part of educated discourse. Commercial records document the economic relationships that sustain this cultural innovation. The international legacy of Chinese frozen desert innovations can be traced through centuries of cultural exchange and adaptation. European ice cream traditions show clear influences from Chinese techniques transmitted through trade relationships and diplomatic contacts. Middle Eastern and Central Asian frozen desert customs demonstrate successful adaptation of Chinese methods to different climates and ingredients. Perhaps most significantly, the Tang Dynasty frozen dessert revolution demonstrates how individual creativity, supported by institutional resources and cultural appreciation, can generate innovations that influence human civilization far beyond their immediate time and place. The combination of poetic imagination, culinary skill, technological innovation, and commercial enterprise created something that neither tradition alone could have achieved. In the quiet of the imperial kitchen, where Master Chef Wang reflects on his decades of innovation and experimentation, the sounds of ongoing food preparation create a gentle soundtrack to memories of extraordinary achievement. The frozen desserts he helped perfect may melt within hours of their creation, but the knowledge, techniques, and appreciation they embody will influence human culture for centuries to come. The eternal sweetness lies not in the temporary pleasure of consuming frozen delicacies, but in the permanent expansion of human possibilities that their creation represents. The Tang Dynasty poets who first accepted the challenge of combining literary excellence with culinary innovation proved that creativity knows no boundaries. That excellence in any field shares common principles with excellence in all fields, and that true artistry can transform even the most unlikely materials into vehicles for transcendent beauty, as the autumn light fades and the imperial kitchen prepares for evening service. The legacy of that first experimental competition continues to unfold in countless kitchens, workshops, and cultural centers throughout the known world. The frozen desserts created by Tang Dynasty poets have proven more durable than the dynasty itself, outlasting empires and political systems while continuing to provide sweetness, beauty, and wonder to anyone willing to appreciate the alchemy that transforms simple ingredients into magic. The story of how Tang Dynasty poets invented ice cream competitions reminds us that the greatest innovations often emerge from the most unexpected combinations of circumstances, talents, and opportunities. When artistic vision meets technical skill, when individual creativity encounters institutional support, when traditional knowledge embraces foreign influences, the results can transform not just immediate practices, but the entire trajectory of human cultural development in the end. The frozen delicacies themselves may be temporary, but the proof they provide of human creative potential is eternal. The sweet legacy of the Tang Dynasty frozen dessert revolution continues to inspire wonder and delight more than a millennium after the first poet picked up a wooden paddle and began stirring cream into crystalline perfection, creating beauty that melts on the tongue but lives forever in memory and imagination.